Welcome to the show. Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron show. On today's show, we will address fellowship. Stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in to our show, Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron show. This podcast is dedicated to addressing various topics from a biblical perspective, coupled with practical solutions for daily application. In essence, we want to take the Bible, which is relevant for all that we need in this life and the one to come, 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, and we simply want to make it plain, which was God's expectation of the prophet Habakkuk in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2. If you would like to reach out to us, and we'll provide some contact information here, but if you would like to reach out to us and submit questions and comments regarding the show, we love to address those questions or comments and even potentially use your questions and your reaching out to us to drive show content. Our contact information, our email address is makeitplainhab22@gmail.com. That would be makeitplainhab22@gmail.com. I'm your host, Eric Garner. I labor for the Ooltewah Church of Christ in Ooltewah, Tennessee. To my left, I've got Cameron Freeman. He is the minister for the East Haven congregation in Memphis, Tennessee. And to my right, I got my good brother, Keith Ford. He labors for the Auburn Hills Church of Christ in Woodbury, Tennessee. And today's topic is fellowship. Fellowship. That's a great topic.
Indeed.
A great topic because fellowship is such an intimate, I think it's such an intimate topic. It's kind of the behind the scenes topic, if I can, and maybe not so much attention is given to it, but fellowship is a biblical topic, and it's actually dealt with in pretty good manner in the Bible. Obviously, anything dealt with in the Bible is going to be done in a great manner, but it receives attention. It receives adequate attention in God's word, and so we want to discuss fellowship. So how would you gentlemen define fellowship?
That common union, man.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
As a Christian, you and I, we should have Christ as that cohesiveness or that bond that brings us together. You know, you think about the words of Jude, as Jude wrote that he was the one was speaking about contending for the faith, but had a more pressing matter, you know, that we have to continue to have that mindset as Jude, you know, when we contend for the faith, it's through Christ Jesus. Yeah. And so I think about that fellowship. That fellowship is something that is important because if you and I both are a part of the same, if we have the same mindset as we're supposed to have, it creates a great avenue. And I believe it's something that is not talked about enough among the church, among members, that fellowship, because we have so many people who are struggling. We have so many people falling away is because they've chosen fellowship with the wrong elements. Right. And again, I got a whole mindset of stuff I don't want to take up all the time on. I'm gonna die.
But there are, you know, I've received, and I know you guys have received questions from members or Christians, not necessarily in the, you know, that have been emailed to us as our show, but just personally. Right. I know that you guys have also, and it's probably true for, you know, probably most ministers or most preachers. They've probably been asked the question, you know, or questions about fellowship and the who, the what, the when, the where, the how. And so based on some even personal conversation that we've had with some Christians, I think this is a good episode to deal with.
Well, I just say, you know, I can remember the first time I heard the term fellowship before I was a Christian. Being in, you know, junior high school, you know, they had the FCA, right, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So from that definition, I kind of got an idea that it was something of commonality. Right. And then when you come to the Bible, you know, one of the words you see, I think the Greek term is koinonia. Right. You know, a joint sharing, a joint participation. And so I think the implication for fellowship is unity. and,
Right.
Unity and togetherness. Because at the end of the day, as Christians, we have so many things in common through Christ Jesus. But the fellowship, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 1:9, God is faithful,
Right.
who has called us into the fellowship of His Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And so we have a commonality, a common joint sharing, a participation, one with each other, but with Christ, because we're members of His body. And so, we have a lot of things in common, and He's the common denominator, so to speak, in our fellowship. So.
Sure. Fellowship can, obviously, when we speak, because you can speak because the words that the Bible were written in did not come into existence just for the Bible. These are words. These are words that were in existence in modern vernacular of that time.
Right.
They would be used at that time, but they become very specific when the Bible uses them. So the word fellowship can be very generic, like you said. You share something in common. Fellowship of Christian athletes. You have fellowship when you're on a sports team. You have fellowship in your family. You have fellowship with friends, and you share commonalities with these people. They create your circles.
Right.
Fellowship kind of creates your circles, or it kind of constricts those circles, I guess, would be the case.
Both.
Right. Or both. Yeah, both. Because, if you don't have anything in common, it's just like, we're gonna constrict this to this group right here. But biblically speaking, I think the term fellowship, and as I looked it up and as I counted the words, I think it's 17 times between the Old Testament and New Testament. I think it's only 2 times in the Old Testament, 15 in the New, and they are the word koinonia, which is fellowship or partnership, koinonos, which is kind of derived from koinonos, which would be partnership. But the idea is commonality.
Coming together.
Okay, but when we're talking specifically in the Bible, for instance, the word apostle was a word before the 12.
Yes.
It was a word before the 12. But when we talk about apostles of Christ, we are being very specific now about apostleship. The word church was in existence before Acts 2.
Yes.
Right? But when we talk about Church of Christ, we're very specific now. So when we talk about fellowship, the word was in existence before the New Testament. But when we're talking about the church and Christian fellowship, we are talking about not only commonality, but spiritual commonality. I think that's important. I think that's important because you can have fellowship, but it not be spiritual. And there are governing factors and certain parameters and specifications about spiritual fellowship. Like I said, again, if you play on a sports team, you got fellowship. By virtue of being part of that group. Right. But, by virtue of having that common.
Firefighters, policemen.
Right.
You think
the
about
fellowship. The fellowship of for the fraternal priest order. I think it is. That fellowship you have there.
But like what you're saying, by being spiritual, it means it's purposeful and intentional.
Right.
So you think about.
And it's regulated.
Right.
I want to say that.
That's the big one.
Right.
And so I'm thinking about Amos 3:3.
Right.
Can two walk together except
they
what I'm saying? So that kind of encompasses what you're saying about it being, regulated and encompassing and things like that.
Right.
If we're going to walk together and we're going to be in fellowship, we got to have some commonality, but we got to make sure that we're walking in the same direction, same rate of speed and things of that nature. So it has to be purposeful.
Well, you saying that, Cam, 1 John 1:7 just screamed at me.
Yeah.
If conditional, man, those 2 letters right there, that IF, so much hangs on those 2 letters.
Oh,
if that is volition, that is, is optional. If we walk, peripatao, have a manner of life, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, then, so you have an if then, and now then is not there, but then is there. Like it's implied.
Yeah.
If we walk in the light as he is in the light,
the conclusion.
Then, we have fellowship. So you have an if then argument. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, then we have fellowship one with another. So as we talk about this idea of spiritual fellowship, I think like number one, it's got to be vertical. right? You got to have fellowship with God.
Absolutely.
Yep, before we can go this way.
And then it extends horizontally.
But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, isn't that the cross? You
That is the cross.
It was that, you think about, and Jesus
Right.
made it possible for us to have fellowship one with another. Because you think about him bringing together Jew and Gentile,
Right.
male and female.
Yeah. Same body.
same.
Ephesians 2:16.
Right.
Key, I'll be listening to East Haven's sermons coming up soon. I'm gonna hear the illustration of the cross and fellowship if I don't preach it first. So,
well, I'm not preaching tomorrow, so
it is definitely, man, when you think about that, I like the way how you guys brought that out, that again, the regulating factor, it comes from God.
Right.
Again, the common denominator, as Cam said, is Christ. So that means that there is a way that I have to fellowship. There are things that I have to keep in mind. And I know we're going to touch down the road, so I won't
Right.
beat that point too much, but I just want us to be mindful that when it comes to that fellowship, that it's something that should be desired,
But
because
that's a good point.
But you are right. Yeah. Like that's a great point.
We have it has to be desired. Like, I want to see my brethren, not just on Sundays and
Right.
Wednesdays. That's why, again, even us, like how we talk, we're all apart from each other.
Across the whole state.
Across the state, of
We
Tennessee.
compass the entire state of Tennessee.
Yeah. But we still daily, we're checking in with one another. We're going back and forth, because that's how it should be in the body of Christ.
Right.
When it comes to fellowship, we have the same mind. We think about the same things. So we should be able to empower and encourage one another. And it baffles me that somehow we've dropped the ball on that, and we've changed fellowship in the Lord's church.
Well, man, that is a deeper study.
Mhm. But
regarding
I
the
just
mind.
add to what he said, though. You think about even our platform here,
Right.
with the viewers who are members of the church, they get to email us, we get to,
Fellowship.
we get to respond,
Right.
and we have good questions, and brethren, and sisters, they want to know Bible things, and they encourage us sometimes with compliments. So it's that fellowship. So you think about the technology,
Right.
that we're able to utilize in order to be able to accomplish having fellowship.
Absolutely.
So,
And when we would consider the purpose of fellowship, and we've touched on this, but to give it a more concrete kind of, definition, or, give it more concrete attention, I guess. The purpose of fellowship is to, again, bring two parties or more together to share in things common,
Right.
because that's the word common, right? It's to have all things common. That's the word fellowship. And fellowship, what it does is it discourages selfishness.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's,
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
big.
And self-absorption.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to fellowship with others, that means I'm going to have to be uncomfortable at times and get outside of what I want, I want to do, how I feel
good
about
point.
things. And I need to. So the purpose of fellowship is to help us to get outside of ourselves, or one purpose of it, to help us get outside of ourselves and think about somebody else. Because sometimes people don't understand that when and we'll get to this, Key, when they forsake fellowshipping, like, they're hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
It's very selfish.
I think to add to the point you made about self, it's implied also in fellowship accountability.
Yes.
With spiritual fellowship, there's accountability.
Yeah.
Because you think about, like, for example, the relationship elders have with the congregation. With Hebrews 13, verse 7, 17, and 24. There's accountability there in that fellowship. And
well, Paul told the Thessalonians to know them.
Right.
You have to know them that have the rule over you. So how can you know them if there's no fellowship?
Yeah.
And we talk about, disfellowshipping, which, how can you disfellowship somebody who has never fellowshipped? It's kind of, they've already disfellowshipped themselves. But it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that Christians who claim they want to go to heaven forsake fellowship.
Make it make sense.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be with God's people down here, but you say you want to spend eternity with them.
Right.
That makes zero sense.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. You don't want to go to heaven.
And that's the problem that we face. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When it comes to fellowship, we have done not such a great job at creating the spaces where people can be vulnerable. And when we need that fellowship, somebody to come pick you up or somebody to chastise you and correct you when you're wrong, guess what? It's you and I have a relationship. We have that fellowship that if I'm wrong, guess what? If Eric comes to me, I'm not going to fly off the handle because I know you're coming to me in a way that you care about my soul. How do I know that? Because we have fellowship one with another, because we have put the work in and continue to work. And that's what we do.
And we know each other. That's the thing about it. We know each other. And going back to what Paul said to the Thessalonians, know them.
Yeah.
Like you have like this is a way for us to know one another and to be able to have those conversations of accountability.
You said something one time a couple months back. I think it was off air. You remember you had said we was talking about it was a biblical discussion, and you said, "Man, I almost know what Cam think on that."
Yes,
you remember that?
Yes.
And so it was like, man, that's a I think a good working practical idea of what we're talking about. Like if you know somebody so much so, and you know how they think, and you know if y'all got the same mindset, like man, I can pretty much tell you what he gonna say.
Yes, I can tell you what Cam's gonna say. Yeah. I can tell you what Key is gonna say about this biblical topic. Right. But when we talk about practicing fellowship, do we see it in the Bible? Certainly. Oh, yes. Where do we first see it? Like when the church is established. Immediately Acts 2:42.
Absolutely.
But notice we're steadfast. And they were steadfast. They were firm and diligent in fellowship.
Yep.
I mean, there is a lack, obviously, of discipline when it comes to fellowship. And you notice that Christians who struggle, like when they struggle and they've separated themselves from God's people. They're not fellowshipping. They're not engaging themselves. And all of this is volition. If we walk in the light, God's not making anybody do anything. Yeah. Every man is free to do that, which is right in his own eyes. Yep. You can still do that. Now to do that would be crazy, but you can do it. But there has to be some firmness in fellowship. Acts 2:42, they were steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine. They continued steadfastly.
You know what? I want to add something to that part.
Sure.
When we talk about fellowship, have you ever noticed that the people who are weaker tend to gravitate to people who are weaker, and they have that fellowship, and so I'm able to have fellowship with them because guess what? Look, I ain't as strong.
Right.
So guess what? When I sin or when I do my thing, guess what? I'm with somebody
they're gonna co-sign
make me
it.
Comfortable in my sin.
Yeah.
It should be that we have mixed it up. It should be us who are stronger. I believe I read it in the book somewhere that you ought to bear you one of the burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ.
Right. Galatians 6:1-2.
And I believe the verse before that says, consider yourself how you would want to be treated in that situation. So it's funny when it comes to fellowship that those who are stronger tend to look for those who are stronger. As we see, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And the weaker continue to look for those who are weaker. But it should be that those who are stronger should be able to identify. Let's learn to be proactive instead of just reactive, because that's why we have people leaving the Lord's church in droves because they don't feel that fellowship.
Right.
It's because we just come to a building, and as I say, and I know I stole it from somebody, but several people have quoted me with it. I'm not the originator of it. They come in, they take their seat, they take their sip, leave their tip, and then they dip. that's how it goes, and that's what happens, and that's what happens Sunday in, Sunday out.
Right. That's true.
There's no connection.
It can become mundane if you don't understand the importance of it and the intimacy of fellowship, because fellowship extends beyond just a couple of hours on Sunday and maybe an hour on Wednesday, because in Acts 5:42. They not only preached and taught in the temple, but they were from house to house daily. They were daily in the temple, and in every house they ceased not to preach and teach Jesus Christ. Acts 5:42. And so our fellowship, even spiritually, common, because man, I'm telling you, like, man, I kick it with Christians. Like I kick it with Christians, man. And so And I do occasionally spend time with people who are non-Christians, maybe in a work setting, and we might go out to, lunch, or, I might, obviously I've been invited to play, basketball or stuff like that. But man,
for the most part,
I hang with like 98% of my outside activities is with Christians.
Yeah.
Because we have that fellowship, and I have that spiritual fellowship, and we know the church did gather together for that. They came together, and we talk about, the importance of coming together, and we talk about what COVID did to the church, man.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about what COVID did to the church.
Or what it's doing to the church.
Yeah, just like you said, man, it destroys some celebrity marriages.
Right.
It destroyed some churches to the point that some churches closed their doors because people did not have that fellowship, and they didn't understand fellowship before COVID. You can clearly see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can clearly see they did not understand fellowship before COVID, or COVID wouldn't have done what it did to them. And so the church gathered together to fellowship in worship. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 20 and 14:23. When you come together in one place, when you come together in the church, when you come together as the church, fellowship is important. We need one another, man. I need to see you. You need to see me. Okay, so if you take all of the one another passages and all of their derivatives, one another, one to another, one for another, one of another. Just for our viewing audience, use any reliable Bible app, search, concordance, whatever. Type in those phrases. See how many times you come up with them. And encourage one another, edify one another, admonish one another, love one another, serve one another. How can we accomplish this if we never see one another? If we're never in fellowship, if we're never together? Man, it's more than just, come in, take your seat, take your sip, leave your tip, and then dip. I love that. That's amazing. Who came up with that, Key?
I stole it from somebody, man.
Man,
I
who you steal it from?
It may have been Robert Williams who said it, but I don't remember.
I like it.
One of my favorite verses when it comes to fellowship is an Old Testament passage. I should say verse is Ecclesiastes 4:9. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he had not another to help him up. And if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone?
Right.
And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken.
It's not easily broken.
I love that, to show that togetherness, man, and that's how we should be. But again, like we stated, and we'll definitely tackle this one of our podcasts also about those who we are not allowed to, is allowed to have fellowship with. But
and we'll touch on it a little bit in this, in this episode if time permits. You consider Hebrews 10.
Yeah.
Hebrews 10, 14 through 25, man. To forsake fellowship. And it baffles my mind that people who don't see the importance of fellowshipping with God's people here want to go to heaven.
Yeah.
I just, my brain can't reconcile that. So you mean to tell me you can't spend a few hours of your life with God's people here, but you want to spend eternity with who you believe are going to be the same people that's going to be in heaven with you?
And I think what you find out though, because for the person who intentionally or who's struggling to have fellowship and spend time with their brothers and sisters, like you're going to spend time with somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like you're going to spend time with your coworkers, your classmates, your neighbors, whoever it may be. And so basically, indirectly, what you're saying, if you're a Christian and you don't want to spend time with God's people, but indirectly you're going to spend time with those in the world, I mean, that's where your allegiance is.
Sure.
Your heart is.
Yeah.
And you got to stand. Hey, listen, you have to stand for that. Like there is going to be judgment on that.
Yeah.
When you stand before Jesus Christ and you have to answer him personally, Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, 23, Jesus said, not everyone that saith unto me.
Right.
Like that's a personal, like you're going to have a personal conversation with Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Not everyone that saith unto me, for many will say unto me, and I will profess to them. You see that personal, that's a personal conversation. When you have a personal conversation with Jesus Christ and he says, why were you willing to come together with your coworkers, people at the gym, people at Walmart, but you weren't willing to come together with the people that I commanded you to come together with? Like that's going to be a real conversation.
It's gonna be
like hypocrisy is a real thing.
Absolutely.
It's a real thing. And so, and church is fellowship.
Yeah.
You know, church, I love that. Church is fellowship by supporting one another, man. That's why we attend each other's gospel meetings and we attend lectureships with each other in vacation Bible schools. And Romans 15:26, you know, the churches of Macedonia, you know, had given to the churches, you know, the struggling churches in Jerusalem, Judea. Right. And Paul said that was their fellowship. You know, that was their ministration. So you had churches supporting and helping one another and participating in this fellowship. We have just a couple of minutes left. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you just think about like, you know, I know we're just talking about kind of like generally, but you know, you think about polishing the pulpit.
Oh my goodness,
man, that fellowship, man.
Man, can you imagine what that's going to be like this year? Oh my!
Yeah, people missed it.
When I tell you, I am so excited about polishing the pulpit this year, man. It's I cannot wait to see. I imagine,
but the overriding thing is the fellowship. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the whole, like obviously the teachers, but the whole thing.
With thousands of Christians fellowshipping. Right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm excited about. Right. I mean, I'm excited about the teaching.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you. When we go, I'll be like, man, somebody speaking, that's cool, but I'll be like, man, I'm gonna get a chance to see this person who's from Texas. Right. This person's gonna come from here. You know, we got all these people.
Man, and we don't get to see them often, you know. And yeah, man, I cannot wait. That's going to be amazing. Polishing the pulpit at the end of August. So what about the prohibition of fellowship with the last minute or so that we have left? So we have fellowship, and we know that fellowship is established. But when we're talking about spiritual fellowship, which is what we're talking about, Christians, our fellowship is regulated, and it's God has set the parameters and the framework of fellowship. And we're not to just have fellowship with just any and everyone. Christians are not to fellowship with darkness and the unfruitful works thereof. Ephesians 5:11 Ephesians 5:11 have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness,
but rather reprove them.
But rather reprove or expose. That word actually translates expose. Right. Expose those works. Don't fellowship with them. Don't have anything in common with them. And so that's why we don't fellowship false teachers and false positions and denominationalism because we don't fellowship those things. Right. Christians should not be spiritually yoking themselves together with unbelievers. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. Right.
And that's various relationships.
Right.
You know, I know a lot of times people take that to mean in marriage.
Right. But, and I'm glad you brought that. We could talk about that. We don't have time. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but that's different partnerships and relationships because of the tendency.
Right.
Man, if you get yoked up with an unbeliever and you in a business transaction and y'all tied up together, you know, business-wise and stuff like that. Yeah.
Man, I know there's more we can say. Key, we got about 10 seconds.
Oh, no, man, we good. We can go ahead and close. Well, this is something we want to pick back up with.
Well, we appreciate you guys reaching out to us. Make it plain, hab22@gmail.com. May God bless you and keep you as you seek to conform your will to his.